The rain hammered against the window, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world beyond our cramped college dorm. I sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the text from my mom. "You're still coming home for Thanksgiving, right? Don't let that boy distract you." My heart sank, not because of her words, but because of the boy she meant, Elliot, my roommate, who was currently sprawled on his bed across the room, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Elliot was everything I wasn't: confident, athletic, the kind of guy who could charm a room without trying. His laugh could light up the gloomiest days, and his hazel eyes had a way of pinning you in place, like he saw straight through to your soul. We'd been roommates for 2 years at this small liberal arts college in upstate New York, and somewhere between late-night study sessions and shared pizzas, I'd fallen for him. Hard. The problem? He'd told me, clear as day, that he was straight. "I'm not into guys, Sam," he'd said last year, casual, as if he were talking about the weather. I'd nodded, laughed it off, and buried my feelings deeper than the roots of the old oak outside our dorm. But tonight felt different. The air was heavy, not just with rain, but with something unspoken. Elliot was quieter than usual, his usual banter replaced by a restless energy. He kept glancing at me, then away, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his worn flannel shirt. "You okay, man?" I finally asked, my voice barely above the rain's roar. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, crossed the room in 3 quick strides, and sat on the edge of my bed. My heart stuttered. "Elliot." "What?" "I don't know," he interrupted, his voice low, raw. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Sam." His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something new in them: fear. Yes, but also a spark of something that mirrored the ache in my chest. He was close, too close, his knee brushing mine, and I couldn't breathe. We'd been friends since freshman year, thrown together by a housing lottery and bonded over our mutual hatred of early morning classes. I was the quiet one, the artist with a sketchbook always in hand, while Elliot was the star of the soccer team, all charisma and easy smiles. But beneath his golden boy exterior, I'd seen glimpses of something deeper: the way he'd linger when we talked late at night, the way his hand would brush mine when passing a coffee mug, the way he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking. I told myself it was nothing, that I was projecting my own hopeless crush onto him. But now, with him sitting inches away, I wasn't so sure. "Elliot," I said again, softer this time, afraid to break whatever fragile thing was forming between us. "Talk to me." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "I can't. Not yet." Then, without warning, he leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine. My world tilted. His breath was warm, unsteady, and I could feel the tremor in his hands as they hovered near my shoulders, not quite touching. "I'm scared," he whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. "Of what?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. "Of this. Of you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I didn't dare unpack. Before I could respond, he pulled back, stood abruptly, and retreated to his side of the room. The distance between us felt like a chasm. The next few days were torture. Elliot acted like nothing had happened, cracking jokes and dragging me to the campus diner like always. But I couldn't unsee the look in his eyes. couldn't unfeel the heat of his breath. I started noticing things I'd ignored before, the way he'd linger in our room when I was sketching, asking about my art with a curiosity that felt too personal, the way he'd tense when our friends teased him about girls, brushing it off with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to ask him what he'd meant that night, but every time I opened my mouth, fear clamped it shut. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined everything? It was a week later, during a late-night study session in the library, that things shifted again. The campus was quiet, the air crisp with the promise of winter. We were alone in a corner study room, surrounded by stacks of books and empty coffee cups. I was struggling through a history paper, my pencil tapping restlessly, when Elliot leaned back in his chair and said, "You ever feel like you're living a lie?" I froze. What do you mean? He didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Like you're pretending to be someone you're not, for everyone else's sake. My heart pounded. Yeah, I said carefully. Sometimes. He turned to me then, his eyes searching mine. I've been doing that my whole life, Sam. And I'm tired of it. His voice cracked, and I saw the weight he'd been carrying, years of expectations, of playing the perfect son, the perfect athlete, the perfect straight guy. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him he didn't have to pretend anymore. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said, "You don't have to be anyone you don't want to be. Not with me." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. A small, shaky movement. "I know," he said. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. That night, back in our dorm, the rain was gone, replaced by a heavy silence. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard the creak of Elliot's mattress. My breath caught as he crossed the room, his silhouette a shadow against the moonlight. Without a word, he climbed into my bed, his body warm and solid beside mine. He didn't speak, didn't explain, just lay there, his breathing uneven, his hand finding mine under the covers. My heart was a wildfire, burning through every doubt, every fear. "Elliot," I whispered, but he shook his head, his fingers tightening around mine. "Don't," he said softly. "Not yet." And so we lay there, two boys caught in the gravity of something bigger than us, too fragile to name. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but in that moment, with his hand in mine, it didn't matter. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side of the truth. The days that followed were a tightrope walk between hope and uncertainty. Elliot and I didn't talk about that night, but the air between us had shifted, charged with a current neither of us could ignore. In the mornings, he'd catch my eye over coffee, a shy smile tugging at his lips before he looked away. In the evenings, he'd sit closer than necessary on the couch, our shoulders brushing as we watched old movies. Each touch, each glance, was a question we were both too scared to answer. But the world outside our dorm wasn't as forgiving. Our college was progressive on paper, but small-town upstate New York had its own rules. Whispers followed us, friends who noticed how we lingered around each other, teammates who raised eyebrows when Elliot skipped post-game parties to hang out with me. I'd come out to a few close friends last year, and while they were supportive, I knew the weight of being openly gay in a place like this. Elliot, though, was still a mystery, even to himself. He'd grown up in a conservative family, the kind that went to church every Sunday and expected him to follow a script, marry a nice girl, Settle down. Carry on the family name. The idea of him stepping outside that script terrified me as much as it thrilled me. One afternoon, as we walked back from class, the tension broke. The campus was ablaze with autumn leaves, the air sharp with the scent of pine. Elliot was quieter than usual, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. "Just packing up and going somewhere no one knows you." I glanced at him, my heart twisting. "Sometimes. But I'd miss this place. And you." He stopped walking, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, I thought he'd bolt. But instead, he stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm doing, Sam. But when I'm with you, it's the only time I feel like myself." My breath caught. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that he was the only thing keeping me grounded in this chaotic, judgmental world. But before I could, a group of his teammates rounded the corner, their laughter cutting through the moment like a blade. Elliot stepped back, his face shutting down, and I felt the loss of him like a physical ache. That night, things escalated. We were at a party off campus, a cramped house filled with too loud music and too warm beer. I'd only gone because Elliot insisted, saying he needed a wingman. But as the night wore on, I watched him slip back into his old role, charming, untouchable, flirting with girls who hung on his every word. I stood in the corner, nursing a drink, my chest tight with jealousy I had no right to feel. He wasn't mine. He'd never promised me anything. Then I saw a guy from his team, Josh, leaning in too close, whispering something that made Elliot's smile falter. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the way Elliot's shoulders tensed, the way his eyes darted to me. Panicked. Before I could move, Josh grabbed Elliot's arm, his voice loud enough to carry. "What's the deal with you and Sam? Huh? You two seem awfully cozy." The room went quiet, all eyes on us. My stomach dropped. Elliot pulled his arm free, his face a mask of defiance. "Mind your own business, Josh." But Josh wasn't done. "Come on, man. Everyone's talking. You're not, you know." He sneered, the word unspoken but clear. I stepped forward, my fists clenched, ready to shut Josh up myself. But Elliot beat me to it. "Back off," he snapped, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what you're talking about." The party resumed, but the damage was done. Elliot grabbed my wrist and pulled me outside, the cold air hitting us like a slap. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean for what?" I cut him off, anger and hurt spilling over. "For people to notice. For them to see what's been happening between us. Or are you just sorry you got caught?" He flinched, and I hated myself for it. "Sam, I'm trying. I'm trying to figure this out. Okay. I've never," he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone." My anger dissolved, replaced by a desperate hope. "Then stop pretending," I said softly. "Stop hiding." He looked at me, his eyes raw with emotion. "I want to. God, I want to. But I'm scared. Sam. My family. My team. If I do this, I could lose everything." I stepped closer, my hand brushing his. "You won't lose me." For a moment, we just stood there, the world falling away. Then he leaned in, his lips brushing mine, soft and tentative, like he was testing the waters of a dream. It was brief, barely a kiss, but it set my heart ablaze. When he pulled back, his eyes were wide, like he couldn't believe what he'd done. "Let's go home," he said, his voice steady for the first time all night. Back in our dorm, we didn't talk. We didn't need to. He climbed into my bed again, this time with purpose, his arms wrapping around me like he was afraid I'd disappear. I held him back, my heart pounding, knowing we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But in that moment, with his warmth against me, I didn't care. All I wanted was him. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and secret promises. Elliot and I were careful, keeping our growing connection hidden from the world. In our dorm, we were free to hold each other, to laugh, to steal kisses in the dark. But outside, we were just roommates, best friends, nothing more. It was a fragile balance, and I knew it couldn't last. Thanksgiving loomed, and with it, the reality of going home. My family was messy but accepting. Elliot's was a different story. He'd told me about his father, a man who saw weakness in anything that deviated from his rigid ideals. If he knew about us, Elliot said one night, his head resting on my chest, he'd never speak to me again. "Then don't tell him," I said, my fingers tracing circles on his back. "Not yet. We'll figure it out." But figuring it out wasn't easy. The rumors on campus grew louder, fueled by Josh and his relentless needling. One day, I found Elliot in our dorm, his face pale, a letter from his father crumpled in his hand. He heard something, Elliot said, his voice hollow. "Someone from the team told him I've been different. He's coming to campus next week." Panic gripped me. What does he know? Not everything, but enough. Elliot's eyes were red, like he'd been fighting tears. He wants to talk, to make sure I'm not throwing my life away. I wanted to scream, to tell him he wasn't throwing anything away, that loving me was the bravest thing he could do. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I'd felt when I came out to my parents, the fear of losing everything you'd ever known. So I held him instead, whispering that we'd face it together. The day his father arrived, the campus was blanketed in snow, the air sharp and biting. I waited in the library, my stomach in knots, while Elliot met him at a nearby cafe. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. When Elliot finally returned, he looked like a ghost of himself, his eyes dull, his shoulders slumped. He didn't yell, he said, sitting on my bed. He just looked at me like I was a stranger, said I needed to fix this, to be the man he raised me to be. I knelt in front of him, taking his hands. "You don't need fixing, Elliot. You're perfect." He shook his head, tears spilling over. "I don't know how to do this, Sam. I don't know how to be this person." "Then let me help you," I said, my voice fierce. "We'll figure it out. Together." That night, he didn't climb into my bed. He sat on his own, staring at the wall, lost in a battle I couldn't fight for him. I lay awake, my heart aching, praying he'd find the strength to choose himself, choose us. The next morning, I woke to find him gone, Panic surged through me. But then I saw the note on my desk. Written in his messy scrawl, "I need time. Sam, I'm not running. I just need to figure out who I am. I love you. I love you." The words burned into my heart. A promise and a wound all at once. I didn't know where he'd gone or when he'd be back. But I clung to those words, to the hope that he'd find his way. Weeks turned into months. Winter gave way to spring, and the campus bloomed with new life. I threw myself into my art, painting the moments we'd shared, the way his eyes lit up when he laughed, the curve of his smile in the moonlight. My friends rallied around me, their support a lifeline. But the hole Elliot left was a constant ache. Then, one April evening, he came back. I was in our dorm, sketching, when the door opened. And there he was, his hair longer, his eyes brighter, but still carrying that familiar weight. "Sam," he said, his voice breaking. I stood, my sketchbook falling to the floor. "You're here." He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling me into his arms. "I went home," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I told them everything. My dad, he didn't take it well. But I realized something. I can't live for him. I have to live for me. And for you." Tears stung my eyes as I held him tighter. "You're enough, Elliot. Just as you are." He pulled back, his hands cupping my face. "I love you," he said. And this time, there was no fear, no hesitation. He kissed me, deep and sure, and I felt the world right itself. We didn't have all the answers. The world was still messy, still judgmental. But we had each other. And as we stood there, wrapped in the warmth of our dorm, I knew that was enough. Love wasn't a cure for everything, but it was a start, a promise to face the world together, no matter what came next.